Now we have our third panel, which is coal shippers, although we have a surprise guest speaker. Not really, but we have Congressman Peterson, who will go first. And we will, I guess, begin with you right now, Congressman. Thank you very much for attending.
Well, I want to thank you for coming out here and holding this field hearing in Fargo. And I want to thank the North Dakota delegation for, I guess, leading to the charge to get you out here, and Governor Dalrymple and our Commissioner of Agriculture, I think, is here, Mr. Fredrickson. This has been, well, as you can see with the turnout here, if I had a farm meeting, I might get 20 people, you know. So I think this kind of turnout shows you the concern that people have on this issue. And back in the spring, Congressman Walz and I and Congressman Nolan sent you a letter that you have received, that laying out our concerns about what we're hearing from our constituents and so forth. And we're still getting those kinds of concerns. I think it's gotten better from what I can tell anecdotally, from what I hear from my constituents. And I've got a written statement for the record I'll make available. I'm not going to read the whole thing. I'll try to be as brief as I can. And also, Senator Franken wanted me to let you know that he has a letter that he wants submitted for the record, so you know his concern about this as well. So this has been a serious problem, and as I said, it seems like it's getting better. I've talked to people in my district, and this is anecdotal information, but what I can tell, the folks that have unit trains and have the bigger facilities seem to be more satisfied with what's going on. I wouldn't say they're all totally satisfied, but that seems to be working better than the folks at the smaller elevators. And it seems like if you're on the main line, that it's a better situation than if you're not. So it's kind of like the crop we've got right now. It's kind of spotty. Some places you get better response about what's going on than others. I think that you know, Burlington Northern has been making significant investments to try to get at the issue, and I think it's probably too early to tell just exactly how that's going to all sort out. But there is a lot of nervousness out there within the farming community about what's going to happen this fall and whether, you know, how big of a problem this is going to be. So the fact that you're here listening to everybody, I think, is very positive. Hopefully you can sort through all of this and come up with the magic solution so that everything will get taken care of, but that's probably too much to ask for. So we just appreciate that you're here and hearing from everybody. I think in terms of farmers, what I hear from them more than, and they're concerned about the availability of rail cars, but what I hear from them more than anything is this basis situation that they have. And I guess you don't have direct control over that. Maybe you have something to say about it, but it's a big problem. And depending on where you're located, you know, it can be a very big problem if you're located in the wrong place. And, you know, you got people apparently that the basis is $1.10 a bushel, which is a significant problem. So if you're by the river or if you're by an ethanol plant, you know, it may be not that big of a problem. But if you're stuck someplace where you're on not a main line and so forth, it can be a real issue. So I guess I'm mainly here to let you know that I'm hearing a lot about this from my constituents. They're very concerned about where this is all going. You know, I've been in 3 meetings with top leadership of BNSF, and I think they're trying to resolve this or trying to address it. I don't know the ins and outs of all of this that much, but what I'm hearing from anecdotally from some of my constituents is that they feel like they've gotten a better response out of BN than they have out of the Canadian Pacific. I don't know, exactly why that is. And I was just visiting with a representative of the United Transportation Union, and he was telling me that they sent a letter to BN back in January when they saw the plan that they were putting out there for this year, telling them that they didn't think this was going to work, that this was not adequate, and I think they were right. So BN is now trying to play catch up, but there were people telling them this way back in January. So whatever you can do to put the heat on and make sure that these railroads are doing everything they can to try to deal with the situation, we'd appreciate it. So I got a much longer statement that I'll enter in the record, and you got plenty to do. You're going to be here a long time today anyway, so I won't drag it out. Thank you for being here.
Thank you very much. And now we will begin with the panel number 3, which, as I mentioned, is mainly made of coal shippers.
Yeah, good morning, Commissioners. My name is Tom Cantor, and I'm the Executive Director of the National Coal Transportation Association. Just by way of quick background, so that everyone knows in the room who we're representing and what we are. Our main mission is to educate and to inform the general public as well as our own membership and governmental entities. We are not a lobbying organization. We do not take positions on legislation, but we certainly do get involved with the Surface Transportation Board, and I'm happy to do so. We have approximately 140 corporate members, and they're associated both from the coal producer standpoint, the utility or coal consumer standpoint, industrial consumers of coal as well. And in the last 14, 15 years, we've had members that produce your wheels and the axles and the car bodies, et cetera. So we have a large interest. We do not have primary transportation carriers as members simply because there should be a certain arm's length arrangement. However, the rail carriers are active and participating members of all of our working subcommittees. And we do this, and we think this is an important part of communications as well as education for us. My job today is not to give you a lot of facts and details that I have collected through the association. In this short time frame, even though we did do some polling in April, we did not do polling for this particular public hearing. So I will defer to my colleagues on this panel and the later panel on coal to give you some details and some recommendations. But let's take a quick look, because I think it is important that you understand where coal fits into the picture. Since the Staggers Act, one of the things I think we're looking at, and I saw it on graphs here earlier today, is the good news of Staggers, of course, is not only for the economic viability of the railroads, but traffic density. And we find out that we take a look at the corridor, we have, through abandonment, through mergers, we have increased traffic density, and this is a good thing, but I think the rule of thumb is once you reach the capacity level, about 70% of capacity level, you're almost guaranteed to have congestion. And we've heard the railroads here just in the prior panel talk about the need for capacity increases. And we would absolutely agree, and we want to support them in every way that we can to increase that capacity. And in that regard, I think utilities and coal producers have done a good part on providing capacity increases. We've watched the Powder River Basin, which is what we're mainly going to talk about today, because even though the CSX has had some challenges, I think when you have a meeting in Fargo, North Dakota, and we're going to talk regionally here about the Powder River Basin. Utilities have stepped up since Staggers with private car ownership, and in the West, we're looking at about 90% of the rail cars. A totally different scenario than what we were just talking about here with grain. Each one of those rail cars today on a replacement value is about $70,000 to $80,000. Our membership has about 80,000 rail cars either under their control, owned, or leased. That's over $6 billion of capacity that we have into the game. Utilities, for the most part, operate 24/7 to unload the trains. Some have even hired third-party unloaders for extra efficiency. And under tariff, we're always there, or try to be always there, for the railroad and at the convenience of the railroad when they arrive and when they want to unload the train and try to unload it quickly. Coal producers are third-party beneficiaries of a contract between the shipper, which is the utility normally, and the railroad. And sometimes they don't get to see the whole contract terms. They get to see the tariff that may be applied to that contract, which they have to accept in their coal supply agreement. And as such, you look in the Powder River Basin, they are loading under a tariff that requires at least, or no more than 4 hours to load a train of 15,800 tons on average, and they're mostly loading in less than 2 hours. And they're doing so with a fast loadout and a batch weigh system that can load the coal, removes the need for the railroads to load in line with a weigh in motion scale, and it can load into 1/4 1% accuracy. And that's about a $20 million investment. The coal producer also has to, at about $2 to $3 million a mile, put in 2 or 3 loops for empty trains. All these things have helped the efficiency of the railroad, and the utilities, in addition, have purchased new aluminum cars. And so all these things, longer trains, more net lading within each car, leads to that 15,800 tons of efficient unit train loading. However, it's painful to take that multi-million-dollar asset and have it sitting on a siding. It actually makes a negative return at that point because you usually have to pay to store the car when it's laid down. So we are also interested, very much so, in system fluidity and velocity, and it counts. However, from a utility standpoint, from a particular power plant standpoint, cycle time is everything. And cycle time is a bit like real estate. It's location, location, location. So just because we look at some metrics that show that the system velocity has increased does not mean that my plant somewhere in North Dakota or Missouri has seen a decrease in cycle time. Now, within this infrastructure, there's no question, you've heard it all morning, and we're not here to beat up on any particular railroad, and you're going to see from my colleagues that we're going to talk about 4, not just the BN and the CP, but you'll also hear about the UP and the CN this morning relative to inadequate service. But what happens when you have inadequate service? It reduces spot coal market, which is a hedge for utilities. In other words, you don't want to put 100% of your market into a long-term contract. You'd like to have the spot market capability, but you've changed the dynamics and the pricing of the spot market. You've changed the ability to move coal into the spot market. You may have take-or-pay contracts with your coal producer if you're a utility. You now have some legal liability, either push out or renegotiate contracts. You have to manage your coal stockpile. Now, I've been told by several railroads that they haven't had a failure because no coal plant has run out of coal. But to the utility, it is a failure. It is inadequate service if he has to manage the coal pile, and in doing so, either go out on the grid, pay more money at the bus bar from what he would have at his own bus bar, or I'm sorry, on the grid, or he has to have more expensive natural gas if he has that capability. But not everyone has that capability. Some people, either it's coal or nothing. And it also affects grid reliability, and winter's coming. Last year on the PJM, not directly applicable here, but it could happen to MISO as well in terms of the interconnect capability. In the coldest day, January the 6th of last year, only 13% of installed wind capacity was available. Natural gas, shale gas even, was freezing at the valve trees coming up, and deliverability is already short in New England, in any case, in mid-Atlantic states. So therefore, coal, and coal that you can physically see and touch and look out the power plant window, is very important to grid reliability, and it's also important to Grandma Olson because her residential rates are going to be more stable and decrease during the winter. I saw Weatherbell Analytics is predicting for this winter, just based on history, not computer models, in the El Nino situation, that we're looking at possibly another cold winter. Equipment utilization. We do not understand, and this is actually under communications, if the railroad lays down a train, and yes, you can go on the computer website, you can find out that the train is laid down, but I have no idea what the intention is. Is it going to be recrewed? Has the locomotives been removed? Is it going to be recrewed in 4 days, 2 days, 3 hours? We don't know. So we ask for more communications. And that can be done on the website, and yes, it would cost the railroads money to revamp the website, but I think it's worth it. It's part of the transparency, and I think the Vice Chairman took away some of my notes by talking transparency in the opening statement, but it's absolutely true. There's a perception by the railroads that they're doing everything they can to communicate. There's a perception by the shipper that they're not doing enough to communicate. So we need to work on that together. In that regard, the NCTA has put together 2 subcommittees, and yes, the BN and the UP are cooperating, and I appreciate that. We're looking at forecasting and equipment utilization. In other words, what can we do to communicate better when we lay trains down? And 2, the forecasting process, we need a better set of metrics. I need to know, or my utilities need to know, what the cycle time is going to be next month, not what it has been over the last 6 months on average. Is there a way to do that? Can I get feedback? And yes, it may take some personnel, and it'll take some review by the railroads to make it happen. I think these would happen, or these would be helpful. My recommendation is, I doubt that there's budget for a field hearing in Denver or St. Louis for coal, but you got a RETAC meeting coming up on October 2nd. I'd like to see the agenda really focus on communications and what we can do. And the NCTA stands by. If it takes monthly conference calls, we'll be there for you to help you do that, whatever it takes. And that's all I have, and I defer to my colleagues.
All right. As Tom mentioned, we're going to be filling in maybe some more detail examples of kinds of things he's been talking about. But first of all, I'd like to thank the Surface Transportation Board for giving me the opportunity to speak today about some of the service problems that my company has been experiencing and their effects on our customers, and then also discuss some of the broader impacts on Western Coal Traffic League members who I'm also representing today. My name is Dave Warner, and I'm the Manager of Field Services for Wisconsin Public Service Corporation, or WPS for short. And WPS serves approximately 445,000 electric customers and 323,000 natural gas customers, primarily in northeastern Wisconsin. During 2013, approximately 82% of all the electricity that we generated and 55% of all the electricity we provided to our customers came from our own coal-fired power plants or those that we jointly own with some other utilities. Our coal-fired power plants burn coal from the Powder River Basin in Wyoming, and all the coal is transported by rail, and we really don't have any viable alternatives. I'm going to talk about events that began in late 2013 and are still continuing, even to this day, that illustrate the importance of rail to our business and our customers, and also the need for improvement on part of our rail service providers. The majority of my comments are going to be based on events that occurred at our Weston site, which is located in north central Wisconsin and is our largest source of coal-fired generation. The coal for this facility is delivered through a joint UP-CN move, so both railroads are involved. Now, at the beginning of December 2013, our coal inventory at Weston was sitting at about 105% of our targeted level, so things were pretty good. And rail deliveries during 2013 had been pretty reliable. However, rail service started to degrade in December. Our December cycle times, and Tom talked about how important cycle times are, increased over 25% compared to our cycle time average for the year up until then. And by the end of December, our inventory had already dropped to 72% of its target. Of course, by then, everybody remembers what kind of winter we were experiencing, and electricity production at reasonable prices during such cold weather is really critical to our customers. And our coal-fired plants are especially critical because they're the only major generation source where we are able to store significant fuel on site. And that guarantees consistent, cost-effective electricity for our customers. However, with rail service having really degraded, we're relying on supplementing our production with natural gas. Unfortunately, delivered natural gas into parts of Wisconsin, the prices had really skyrocketed. At times, the cost of natural gas into our territory was 5 times higher than the commonly quoted Henry Hub price, which was itself on the rise. Now, our rail service continued to be substandard throughout January and February of 2014, so by the end of February, our inventory had dropped all the way down to 23% of our target level. Therefore, at the beginning of March, we instituted coal conservation measures in order to avoid completely running out of coal. We also began providing weekly updates of our Weston inventory to our Public Service Commission, who by this time were very interested in the situation. And we also filed a Form OE-417 with the Department of Energy on March 6, 2014. Now, the OE-417 was filed to notify DOE of a fuel supply emergency with the potential to impact electric power system adequacy or reliability. Our coal conservation measures increase the cost of providing electricity to our customers because lower cost coal-fired generation was replaced with more expensive alternatives. Now, our coal conservation measures, though costly, did little more to stop our inventory erosion because cycle times continued to degrade. During the first quarter of 2014, our cycle times were more than 65% greater than the 2013 January through November average. Now, Weston's inventory finally recovered significantly because we had a long-planned May 2014 outage at our largest Weston unit. However, we kept coal conservation measures in place because we still weren't getting rail service. And we also were concerned about the impact that a hot summer might have on our coal inventory. Now, initially, when we talked to UP and CN, they indicated that the severe winter weather was really the primary cause of our service issues. However, after winter ended, rail service didn't really significantly improve. Our cycle times during the second quarter 2014 were still almost 50% greater than our 2013 January through November average. Now, we had a cool start to summer, and that helped us retain inventory to some extent, so we temporarily removed our coal conservation measures in June. However, our service still is struggling, and we have lost an amount of inventory that was equal to about 17% of our target during July, and another 20% more of our target has been lost during August. Now, as a result, we reinstituted our coal conservation measures in mid-August, which is adding to the millions of dollars that these measures have already cost our customers. Our customers have been affected by other rail service shortfalls as well. We're joint owners of the Columbia facility, which is located about 40 miles north of Madison, Wisconsin, and which is operated by one of the other utilities that also owns part of the plant. Now, this facility is under contract with the BN, although CP is also involved as the delivering carrier in this move. Despite Columbia being served by a different railroad from Weston, Columbia has experienced the same type of rail service shortfalls as our Weston facility. And we have also implemented coal conservation measures at Columbia, which continue to this day, creating, again, additional replacement energy costs for our customers. And of course, we're now concerned about having inadequate inventory as we head into winter. Now, other WCTL members, going even broader, have experienced similar problems. Many WCTL members have seen their coal stockpiles depleted to the point where they also have had to use coal conservation measures. Many have been conserving coal for extended periods of time. The STB heard about such measures back in its April hearing, and here I still am talking about some of the same things. Among things that WCTL members have experienced, significant increases in cycle times from the same period in 2013, sets of rail cars parked for weeks. BNSF apparently had 100 or so sets parked sometime in June of 2014. An inability to add rail car sets. Millions of tons of coal has been requested but not delivered. Inability to plan for future periods due to poor rail service performance. We don't know if this is going to end next week or 2 months from now or when. Inability to, millions of dollars of replacement of energy costs. Increases in dwell times at our plants, increases in interchange times, and the switching of units to alternative fuel or taking units offline or running units at very low levels just to keep them in service, just in case we have some really hot weather or really cold weather. Now, many WCTL members are also particularly concerned about the reassurances from the railroads, such as BNSF, that they will not let the utilities run out of coal. Well, these reassurances are not very meaningful, considering that we're going to take action to conserve coal well before we completely run out. And all these measures cost our customers money. Now, BNSF has also suggested it will spend its way out of this problem. Matt Rose made this point just 2 weeks ago. However, most WCTL members have been told that service may not get back to normal until 2016. Now, other carriers, such as UP, have kind of flown under the radar on these service issues. There's been a lot of focus on BN and CP. However, WPS's situation demonstrates that problems persist with many carriers, and the board has to be vigilant maybe with all of them. WCTL has requested on several occasions that the board require additional reporting from BNSF and other railroads as necessary. These coal-specific statistics are vital to utilities trying to understand and track the recovery of the railroads, and WCTL submits that the board would also benefit greatly from having this kind of data. Moreover, agencies and entities charged with electric system reliability are also keenly interested in such data. As such, WCTL requests that the board require the following information from BNSF on a biweekly basis: the actual number of coal cars loaded, number of coal cars requested, the average number of coal train sets presently in service broken down between shipper-supplied private train sets and BNSF-supplied train sets, any restrictions on utilization of shipper-provided equipment in BNSF coal service, any restrictions on the availability of train crews for coal service, any shortages in locomotive power available for coal service, and the average cycle times for coal trains operating between the PRB mines and certain key interchanges such as Council Bluffs, Iowa, Chicago, Illinois, Minneapolis, St. Paul, Superior, Wisconsin, Kansas City, Missouri, or Fort Worth, Texas. Now, the board should also consider requiring BNSF to supplement and detail any recovery plans it has for coal service on a bi-weekly basis. As for the other railroads, WCTL requests that the board order UP to provide interchange dwell times and yard dwell times in Illinois and Wisconsin for UP and CN, as well as UP coal train cycle times from the PRB and Colorado to Chicago, Illinois. CN's average coal train speeds to and from Chicago, Illinois, and any restrictions on the availability of crews of coal service on UP and CN. Likewise, UP should provide cycle time data for coal trains moving from the PRB to Chicago, Kansas City, or Fort Worth. WCTL also urges the board to consider any other actions it believes will aid all the shippers impacted by BNSF's service crisis and other railroad service issues. So on behalf of WPS and WCTL, I thank you for allowing me this opportunity to testify today. And also, I am putting a copy of my testimony in the record. So I'm happy to answer any questions.
So we're about out of it, but I still wish you a good morning, Commission, and I appreciate this opportunity to once again testify before the board. My name is Mark Atkins. I'm Vice President of TUCO Inc. TUCO is a single-purpose entity that provides coal transportation and coal handling services to 2 large coal-fired power plants in the Panhandle region of Texas. TUCO typically delivers approximately 8 million tons of coal to these 2 power plants under transportation agreements with the BNSF. The BNSF and its predecessors have delivered TUCO's coal since the 1970s. Our prior contracts contained meaningful service standards, but the BNSF stopped agreeing to those several years ago. TUCO operates and utilizes 10 sets of privately owned rail cars. Each set is 120 cars. With these, we deliver about 8 million tons of Powder River Basin coal to Wyoming. Including the spare cars, our fleet consists of approximately 1,300 rapid discharge and gondola cars. This fleet of cars has a value of about $85 million. I appeared before the board and testified at the first hearing in this proceeding on April the 10th. At that time, I made reference to what could best be described as poor rail service. January through March of 2014, TUCO cycle times were 124% of expected historical values. These high cycle times translated to lower coal stockpiles at the plants. Since that April 10th hearing, TUCO has experienced month after month after month of even higher cycle times. Average cycle times for August were 170% of expected historical values. This can only be described as horrific rail service if you can consider it service at all. BNSF has declined our request to put additional equipment, either privately owned cars or railroad-owned cars, into service to make up for the extremely long cycle times and increase our coal inventory. It has now become common for BNSF to park our trains without notice, either before or after the fact. TUCO routinely discovers that a train, usually a loaded train, has been parked when one morning trace of cars has been compared to the prior morning's trace. There's no voicemail, there's no email, there's no text message, nothing. It's just parked. I found out this morning I had 4 sets out of the 10 sets parked. Yesterday it was just 2 sets. But anyway. When questioned about this lack of communication in another forum, Matt Rose of the BNSF reportedly replied that shippers can go to the BNSF website and find out where their cars are located. One of the things you can't find out on this website is what the disposition of these cars and these trains is to be. Are they going to be parked there 24 hours? Are they going to be parked 48 hours? Are they going to be parked there over 9 days like one of our trains was last month? So you have to remember that TUCO we're using privately owned rail cars. These aren't BNSF sets to deliver the coal. Parking one of my trains involves setting an asset that's valued at $8 to $9 million on a siding. Usually awaiting power, sometimes crews, sometimes both. Power and crews are referred to as critical resources. I can certainly empathize with all the ag folks that are here today, as my family's been involved in farming and ranching for multiple generations, mostly in Kansas. And I certainly enjoy consuming the products that result from these farmers and ranchers' hard work. Review of the August 29th edition of the 2014 grain orders update, as provided by the BNSF, shows that 2,029 past due cars and 2,285 field order cars. I just want to give you a little perspective. BNS coal shippers utilize an online coal forecasting tool to communicate the quantity of coal to be loaded each month. We communicate this to both the coal producers and the railroad. These quantities are referred to as coal nominations. January through August of 2014, TUCO nominated 5.9 million tons of Powder River Basin coal. During that same 8-month period, TUCO received only 4.2 million tons, a shortfall of 1.7 million tons. That's equal to 14,300 rail cars that are past due. To help you visualize this, if you could put all these cars together end to end, it would form a line of cars that would stretch from the STB's East Street office in Washington to Independence Hall in Philadelphia, and you'd still have enough cars left over to circle the block a few times while you look for a parking place. BNS has stated on more than one occasion it will not let any utility run out of coal. In the first place, why should the fate of the electricity supply of a region of Texas or anywhere else be put into the hands of a single railroad? But in any event, how will BNSF make good on its promise? Will they add additional BNSF resources to the mix? I don't know. If you assume for a minute that a power plant has reached what BNSF considers critical inventory level, that's 10 days of inventory, and then a significant weather event like the October 13 blizzard in the Powder River Basin occurs, what then? That blizzard shut down coal production and train loading at some of the mines for 3 days and prevented BNSF crews from getting to the trains. Recovery from a disruption like that can take a week or longer. If BNSF is the only railroad allowed to serve that utility, running out of coal could become a reality. What are BNSF's plans to address extreme weather events during the winter of 2014-2015? Weather forecasts for much of the BNSF territory seem to indicate below normal temperatures and higher than normal precipitation, but other ones say they could be above normal temperatures and below normal precipitation. On August the 7th, TUCO sent a letter to Fred Forstall and Gabe Myers at the STB's Office of Public Assistance. We summarized the current state of affairs between TUCO and BNSF and requested assistance in getting better service from the BNSF. This letter followed a meeting that we had with Mr. Forstall and Mr. Myers in April. It's too early to determine if their contacts with the BNSF will result in improvements to the situation, but TUCO is not optimistic. As part of my April 10th testimony, I asked the board one question. What is the BNSF's common carrier obligation to its customers? Surely, in the case of TUCO, the BNSF is not meeting it. TUCO is reviewing its options available under its contracts to rectify the current situation. TUCO is also asking the STB to take more forceful action in making BNSF take steps that are necessary to improve transportation of coal to TUCO facilities. Some of these steps may include specific commitments to dedicate the necessary crews and equipment to reduce its cycle times to historical levels and to help us reestablish inventories to acceptable levels. Obviously, things need to change. Finally, as I've stated previously, TUCO and the power plants it serves have been around since the 1970s. They've experienced the passage of the Staggers Act, Rail Act of 1980. We've experienced the benefits of rail competition and rail transportation contracting that followed immediately after the passage of the act. And then we've also experienced the consolidation of the rail industry and the diminishment of competition and contracting for PRB coal service to the point where we are today. We're to a point where BNSF can mismanage its business to the point that coal plants are on the verge of running out of coal. But the options for averting that disaster are almost exclusively dependent on BNS's ability and willingness to act. TUCO submits that this latest service crisis highlights the need for the board to take steps to counter the harm caused by rail industry consolidation, such as improving the ability of shippers to obtain access to service from other railroads using the tracks of the railroads that cannot meet their legal obligations to serve. I thank the board for its willingness to continue its investigation into this rail crisis, and I also thank you for the time allotted to me today.
Thank you, Mr. Atkins. We'll now hear from I guess, a late addition, the Basin Electric Power Cooperative. Mr. Tomac?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman Elliott, Vice Chairman Miller, and Commissioner Begeman. My name is Steve Tomac. I work for Basin Electric. I'm here today on behalf of Basin Electric and our subsidiary, Dakota Gasification Company. First of all, as Mark indicated, good morning, or what's left of it. We have long advocated, and we really appreciate your presence here today because we've been long advocates for a more engaged board, and when it comes to taking proactive action for affected shippers. Your presence here is appreciated and very timely. Basin Electric is a member-owned wholesale generation and transmission cooperative. We serve approximately 2.8 million consumers and 137 rural electric co-ops in 9 states. While many in the energy sector look at this issue from a singular perspective, most of our member owners are at the end of the line, are the very ag shippers who are facing long waits for rail service. We support our members as they air their concerns and service issues with the railroads. Our concerns today are really twofold, and I'll consolidate those into two categories: coal deliveries and shipments of products. First, with respect to the coal deliveries, I want to make it clear that we appreciate that the Burlington Northern Santa Fe has been trying to work with us. Last December, our Leol station near Stanton, North Dakota, was 19 days from shutting down due to dwindling stockpiles. To return the stockpile to an acceptable level, we spent 30 days trucking coals to the plant, hauling up to 250 loads per day. Last spring, Burlington Northern brought on an enhanced third crew, which helped. With our stockpile facing similar problems in recent weeks, Burlington Northern has stated they will resume enhanced service this fall to help rebuild our stockpile to 650,000 target that we have. We trust that they will deliver on that promise. Also, with respect to coal, the Laramie River Station in Wheatland, Wyoming, which we operate, is the only other coal power plant receiving coal by rail that we operate. For much of the spring, our stockpile held enough coal in reserve for roughly 17 to 19 days of operation. That level recovered substantially last spring and into the early summer due to an outage of one of the 3 units that we operate there. Burlington Northern has given us assurance now that all 3 units are back in operation. BNSF has given us assurances that we'll return to the 136 car units that we have had in the past. Again, we're hopeful that the promise will be as delivered as promised. On product shipments, it's a little bit of a different story. Dakota Gasification Company is a unique part of our operations. It's a mine-mouth facility that converts lignite coal into natural gas. It's located north of Beulah, North Dakota. In addition to the natural gas is delivered by pipeline, and it's a one-of-a-kind facility in the United States. It was built during the Carter administration. 26 plants were originally going to be built. One got built. It was adjacent to our Antelope Valley station there, and it has a lot of synergies with our Antelope Valley station. We acquired ownership of that in the late 80s. In addition to the carbon dioxide, we produce a number of co-products there. One of those is carbon dioxide that is pipeline and sequestered in Canada for enhanced oil recovery. The facility also produces a number of other co-products such as anhydrous ammonia, phenols, crucilic acids, kryptons, ammonia sulfate fertilizer, and tar oil. All of these products are shipped either by truck or rail, depending on their final destination. But I think it's noteworthy to mention that in 2002, we shipped nearly 80% of those co-products by rail, and in 2013, that dropped to nearly in half to just 48%. The local rail crews at that facility are really great. They show up when they say they will, and they do as we request. But it takes too long to get the product to the consumers and get those cars back. Since 2010, DGC, Dakota Gas, has seen drastic increases in transit times to all products. For example, in 2014, we began shipping an additional 30 to 50,000 tons of ammonia and hydrous ammonia by truck rather than by rail, just to keep up with the demand. But the most extreme example is the tar oil movements to Bayport, Texas. We based a lot of our decision based on our delivery assumptions on last year's cycle time for those cars. And so we invested nearly $40 million, or are investing that, into facility upgrades so that we could produce more tar oil. But since last September, cycle times have jumped from 30 days last September for a cycle time on those cars to more than 50 days. That's just in 1 year or a little less. And so because of that, we are shipping only 60% of our contract to Bayport, Texas. These delays have resulted in more than $17 million in lost revenue since July of 2013. We've also contracted for $3 million to lease an additional 100 additional rail cars to allow us to meet those demands. But this congestion is forcing us to actually burn the tar oil in our boilers rather than market it because we simply cannot get the product to the market on time. In addition, you should also know that Dakota Gas is investing $400 million to build a urea fertilizer plant. This type of plant is sorely needed in the region and is in high demand for our agricultural customers. Our urea plant, when it's completed, is projected to ship 40% by rail. Shifting to urea means we'll be shifting less anhydrous ammonia, good thing. Reducing shipments of the TIH material by rail is really a good thing, but we need the confidence to know that we can ship the urea and have it delivered to our agricultural users in a timely fashion. Finally, another one of our subsidiaries, the Dakota Coal Company, which handles lime deliveries from our Franny lime plant in northwest Wyoming. Lime is an essential product used in the power plant emission scrubbers and water treatment facilities. Lime is also used in the purification process for sugar beet production and other industrial environmental uses. Cycle times and lack of service has required shipping more and more of this product by truck rather than by rail. Rail disruptions for one product can have ripple effects through the entire economy. Thank you again for coming to North Dakota and hear our concerns. I think we all want a robust rail economy because we rely on it so much. We have a cordial working relationship with the railroads and hope that the public hearings like this bring the much needed attention to the rail challenges we are facing, and maybe together we can find a mutual solution to this. I think in closing, I was struck by what Commissioner Frederickson from Minnesota had to say. It seems to me that, obviously the Burlington Northern is delivering more. They've got more product to deliver, and they're delivering more. But it seems like we're in a trust but verify situation. We are made promises, and now we just need to verify that. We have no choice but to trust, but we appreciate your help in verifying that. Thank you.
Excuse me. Thank you very much to the panel for their presentations. It was very helpful. It gives us a better perspective on what's going on with respect to the Powder River and coal train service throughout the country. I understood from several of you that most of your train service is based on contracts. Have you tried to work with the railroads at all on suspending some contract obligations to possibly receive coal through other avenues? Has that been explored at all?
Not yet.
I think some utilities have agreed to, what's it called, if it's going out of route and increasing cycle times to to help the railroads out and did a few things of that nature. And in turn, I don't think they've been able to add unit trains into the system. In other words, get more train sets.
I see.
But, you know, that's good for everybody if we can do it.
Yeah, we've had discussions also on maybe trying to avoid Chicago, come up with different interchange points, but at this point, none of them have really come to fruition at all.
I think
Go ahead.
from our perspective, the remedies have been suggested. We've visited with them. The remedies for the Laramie River Station are to get back to 136 set, and I think we're at currently delivering at a 125 or something, and that will be helpful. They've agreed to do that again. We're waiting for that to happen. And for the Stanton Station, which is located here in North Dakota, we needed that third set to begin deliveries to the Leo Station, and they've agreed to that, but we're again waiting for that to happen.
Okay. As far as, I mean, you painted a fairly gloomy picture with respect to service. And, I mean, what do you anticipate as we go forward here when we get into the winter months? It sounds like your inventories are down, your cycle times are down. It doesn't sound like they're significantly improving based on what I'm hearing from this group. Do you see, you were mentioning reliability of the grid, the electric grid. Do you see any, I guess, serious concern about the reliability of the electric grid as we go forward here based on what you've been telling us?
Yeah, I mean, you know, we're definitely concerned, and I think a big part of it is just the lack of transparency. You know, we'll plan way differently if we know we're going to have service issues that last a month. Then, I mean, that's part of the reason we have inventory, as compared to service issues that are going to last 9 months, like this has. You know, we can attempt to take measures to conserve coal maybe earlier if we think it's going to be very lengthy in duration, and maybe have less overall cost to our customers than if we keep hearing, yep, things are going to get better, things are going to get better, and then they don't, and then all of a sudden we have to kind of panic, if you will, and put some extreme measures in later. So I think there's just a lack of transparency, I think, as to when this is going to get resolved. And I don't have an answer to that.
And do you think we can help by supplying more information? I think you referenced that.
I think that could be a possibility.
Okay.
I think with respect to, again, our Mr. Chairman, I think your question is a very good one because of the reliability of the grid is going to affect us all. And, you know, we don't need to go back until, the last January when we had the polar vortex and what we saw happen with the natural gas situation during that period of time where gas prices spiked to an unbelievably high. You know, with respect to coal, though, you know, the stockpile gives us that insurance against that, and so you're very perceptive with that. We recognized sometime in last October or November that we were going to be short based on the turnover or based on the number of sets we were receiving at the Leo Station, and so we did similar to what Dave mentioned. We implemented a drastic measure and we began trucking coal that 8, 10, 12 miles, whatever it is, from the Stanton or from the mine north of Beulah to Stanton. And so we had to implement an emergency measures to get that. But we also understand that during the middle of the winter, there are service issues that even the railroad has no control over. The cars cake, I mean, they froze, the coal gets frozen in there, and so there's service issues that we have. So we need some better planning and better service early on, which is, I think, what David is suggesting.
Thank you. Commissioner?
Thank you all. Very, very much appreciated. Some of you are repeating things that you've told us a few months ago, but it is perhaps even more important now and can inform your planning for the months ahead. The illustrative, I guess, calculation that you provided us, Mr. Atkins, about the 14,300 carloads behind. So what have your utilities done in the meantime? I mean, is it that they had such a stockpile in advance that they were able to make up for that, or?
We typically kept a little bit larger inventory than maybe the target inventory, just because I'm an old guy, I've been around a long time, and bad things happen. They always happen. Something happens, weather, flooding. You can have mechanical breakdowns at the mines or the plants. So it's just, that's an insurance policy. Those have been depleted.
Because, I mean, I think collectively, or I don't want to put words in your mouths, but certainly two of you were not really enamored by the fact that BN committed to making sure that no utilities ran out of coal. I, for one, actually commend them for that being their first priority for you. Certainly, that doesn't mean that you don't need additional stockpiles, but I don't want them left with the impression, from a lack of comment from, at least for me sitting here, that go ahead and let them run out and that we're not going to care, because that would be devastating. You know, I'm curious, given sort of what the current administration has been proposing with coal going forward. You know, obviously you have to have that in your planning purposes. Maybe things aren't all a done deal yet, but how you're probably in the midst of planning alternative energy supplies, and I'd kind of like to hear from you as far as how you've expedited that, or how, you know, you're kind of getting it from all sides, from not getting the service that you need to ultimately maybe being told you can't even burn the coal of the facilities that you have. So what are you doing in turn beyond just your service problems, but as far as planning to keep the lights on for your customers even without coal?
Well, we're still planning to have coal. I mean, we have kind of are looking, of course, it's way too early to see what's going to happen exactly with that clean power plan, if that was one of the regulations you were referring to. But, you know, our Weston site in particular, we have a plant that first went into operation in 2008. It has all the latest emission controls on it, and that plant we certainly expect to run very much going forward. We have another large unit at that site that we're in the midst of installing pollution control equipment on it. Again, we expect that plant to run very much going forward. So we'll certainly work around whatever rules come out, but we definitely expect some units to be running definitely well into the future.
Commissioner Begeman, again, that's an excellent question. We feel a little bit.
It's not.
I mean, we could give you a whole day on this thing, because we find ourselves in a unique situation, probably not unlike the Burlington Northern Santa Fe, in that this respect, we serve the Bakken also. And the load growth in the Bakken is going to be, just for the Bakken, I think our latest forecast is somewhere on the over 1,000 megawatts by 2025. So we need to find an additional 1,000 megawatts. Unfortunately, with the current administration's proposed 111B and 111D rules on carbon capture, on carbon intensity, we find ourselves in a situation where we can't finance additional coal plants, or the private industry won't, and so the only alternative is natural gas. We have built, or are in the process of building, 6 45 megawatt peakers in the Bakken area, just to fulfill and stabilize this region until we can get additional transmission into the area. We've also put out an RFP so that we can, looking across the country or within the local grid, if you will, to see what's available. We also have plans for 2 combined cycle plants, and they're very preliminary at this point in time, but one somewhere in the central part of North Dakota, a 500 megawatt combined cycle plant, natural gas fired, which located in central North Dakota, and I believe we're looking at something in the states of Wisconsin or Minnesota in a partnership with a combined cycle plant also. So we are reaching out. We've got a planning process with a 10 to a 15-year window as to how we address that need. Coal will continue to be a substantial part of that. We currently have about almost 20% of our generation comes from renewables, a bit from natural gas, a bit from nuclear by a plant in Iowa, and the rest would come from coal, which is in that 60 to 70% range in rough terms. That will continue to, we continue to depend on that, those same coal plants, and will until probably 2030 to 2040, when some of those plants reach their age where we'd have to make some determination on that. Keep in mind that most of the coal generation facilities for the cooperatives were built in the mid-'80s, partly due to the Fuel Use Act passed in 1978 when we had the last natural gas shortage. So our coal plants are relatively young. They're very environmentally controlled. They've got the latest technology, and so we're doing the best we can to keep those up and reliable.
And my last question, what is your current stockpile level? I mean, how many days out? Or is it, are you reaching a desperate situation, which I don't want you to do, but, or maybe you want to talk more from your membership, from the
Well,
from the membership.
From, I guess, our
From the league.
individual standpoint, we, as I had mentioned, we had done some building when we had our largest unit out in May, and we have been degrading since. We're not back into crisis mode at this point, but it's just that we're kind of heading back that way. That I think is the most disconcerting with winter coming.
I would add to this point. Keep in mind that I think measuring the stockpile today is a good barometer, but keep in mind that the spring and the fall are our catch-up months. The peak use for electricity is the summer peak and the winter peak. And so these are our catch-up months. These are the months where we have an opportunity to increase our stockpile. If we can't increase it at this point in time, it's not going to happen, and we're going to be in a crisis situation. So we need to be moving today, now through the 1st of November, because who knows when winter will set in. We have acceptable stockpile at both facilities that are served by rail today, but again, we're concerned as we get into the winter months. If we get another winter like we did last year, we could be in a critical situation.
And just one last question for you, and of course then you had mentioned the two, I guess, commitments from BN right now that you are hopeful, and at what point will you know whether that has been successful, the delivery time? Or, should I wait for the last panel to tell me that? I mean, you must have a ballpark as far as...
We're monitoring this on a daily basis. To be honest with you, Commissioner, I'm not sure whether we make an assessment of September 15th or October 1st, but sometime in the early fall here, we'll reanalyze that. We'll continue to communicate with them and continue to put the pressure on.
All right, well, let us know if it...
We will. Thank you.
Thank you.
Vice Chairman?
So I'm curious, following up on Commissioner Begman's questions. So generally, when you're thinking about the number of days of stockpile you want to have available, and I appreciate the point you made, Steve, that it's not so much what you have today, but are you prepared for winter? But how many days would make you comfortable?
Go ahead.
You guys alluded to some contractual arrangements here.
And actually this whole thing that we've been going through is actually making us reevaluate our inventory policy, and to some extent, maybe it's a little bit of a competitive type issue to put out exactly number of days necessarily. But like I said, we have been looking at increasing that number. Now, certainly, you hear some of the I think the categories that maybe the railroad, 10 days is a crisis, 20 days is another category, 30 days is kind of another, and if you're over 30, then that's the lowest priority. I think
That's what you're being told by the railroads.
Well,
That's kind of the way they're
but-
looking at the.
Right. But from our perspective, 30, used to be a reasonable number, but we don't think it is anymore.
So among other things, if the railroads are making a commitment to say that when it gets critical, we'll see to it that your needs are met, would you want to communicate to them that, the point at which, in your view, it's critical is sooner than when they think it's critical?
Well, we talk to we talk to the railroad's operations people, obviously every day. Every time we look and a train gets sit down, they might not tell us, but we check and we call them and ask why. So there's those conversations. We have conversations every week now throughout this thing. They know exactly actually what our inventory is, and they know the issues going into the winter, and I think there's a lot of communication that we're having with the railroads over our inventory and where we think it needs to be. So they certainly know that 10 days is not the time to start concentrating on it.
Commissioner Mayor, I can comment as a non-producer. It is something of a competitive issue because you're going to be selling into the bus bar, into the grid, and if you have coal, you might be able to sell your electricity when other folks don't have it at, let's call it a phenomenal price. If you don't have coal in your stockpile, you may buy it on the grid at a phenomenal price. And so that can have quite a competitive effect that may have not existed 20 years ago, but it certainly exists today with all the interconnect systems and the larger interconnect systems. Every plant may have a unique, what is a normal and a prudent amount of coal in terms of days of coal burn on the ground. Do you have natural gas as a buildup or as a backup in your system? Do you have natural gas on the same property? Are you a plant that has no natural gas nor any hope of getting natural gas to your property? And so therefore, if you run out of coal, you run out of electricity as well. So they have to make those decisions on what's normal. And then you have the Public Service Commission telling you, well, you really should have fewer days on the ground because it costs money, and it costs money to the consumer to have it. And so it's going to be an ongoing issue. But I've also seen since April, not every utility is going to increase their stockpile on the ground because they may feel like they have alternatives, but I'd say 20 to 30% are saying, I have a new normal.
Mm-hmm. Mr. Kenner, you made the point that your industry basically has made a $6 billion investment in rail cars, plus there's been extensive investments made in terms of being able to load coal quickly, measure it, all of the sidings and those kind of things. So when those investments were being developed, what sort of dialogue or contractual discussions did you have with the railroads? I mean, in terms of making that sort of an investment and commitment to help secure your transportation, did you get service commitments in return from the railroads? Was
Again-
there dialogue about whether or not they would make that investment for rail cars rather than the utility industries making that investment?
Those investments started probably in the late 70s and early 80s when the railroad simply didn't have the money, pre-staggers. And then we saw also in the east, particularly, if you were to put in a better and a fast load out, the railroads would contribute some money, or if you, because you had short and less than train loads and smaller loop tracks in the eastern, hollers there in West Virginia and Kentucky. And so they would actually contribute some money, or they would let you pay it off on a per ton basis. They put up the money because they would encourage a smaller coal operator to go ahead and build a fast load out. It may not be a batchway system, but it would be a flood loader, which they didn't have before. I mean, you had the old-fashioned tipples way up into the 70s as time was moving on. And then they wanted to get longer train sets, go to 100 cars, 110 cars in the east again, so that they would look for the loop track. When the West got started in the Powder River Basin, there was all this land, and it just started out with a better system. But then they started doing multiple loadouts, and yes, the railroads did work with the coal producers to go to 2 and 3 loop tracks on a particular property, and so that was kind of an understanding between the parties. But for the most part, the coal producers looked at their customer base, and this is what they wanted to do to get the capacity to move that kind of coal. We're talking 400 million tons out there.
So I would be curious, really, maybe all 4 of you might want to comment on this. I mean, certainly I've heard from some of the grain shippers, this feeling that it's sort of an unfair playing field in terms of how the contracts are written in the negotiations. There's a demurrage charge if the shipper doesn't do what they're supposed to do, but if the railroads don't deliver, there's no reciprocal break on pricing or whatever. And I'm curious what your reaction is to that. Does it feel like you negotiate with the railroads in the environment in which you have to negotiate with the railroads, does it feel like it's tipped in the balance of railroads?
I guess as an example, it just seems like a lot of times when the contract comes, you go through contract negotiations with the railroads, you're provided a PDF document, not a Word document, and you can't do a whole lot with it. And that's because of being a captive shipper. But it's not that bad, but it just sometimes feels that way, I'm sure.
I would say it might depend on when you last renegotiated your contracts, but I think starting maybe around 2005 or so, I think we started to see that the railroads became increasingly assertive, if that's the word, over contract terms in general. And I think there's been a significant amount of degradation since then on service standards and things like that, from my perspective.
It's pretty much one-sided. I mean, cite the documents that are in place, and that's how your demurrage is determined. So there's $600 an hour, and they will charge me $600 an hour if I have a mechanical breakdown in my unload facility. But there's no reciprocal penalty if they park one of my trains for 5 days.
A good question. I'm not sure that, I think maybe for the most part, the ag guys find themselves in a little different situation. I mean, we have a process in place that's very expensive to, I guess I can't comment on that, so it'd be ex parte, $9 million and 9 years later, so we'll leave that alone, but I'll stop there.
And then several of you have mentioned this issue of, communications, transparency, data. And Mr. Adkins, you made the point that one of your train sets might get parked on the side of the road. You don't even know about it. You're not even given any information. So what I think it might be helpful if you could each do, to the extent maybe one building on the other, lay out the kinds of communications you would like to have from the railroads that you are not getting now, that if you were getting it, you think might make your situation better.
Well, we can get information. There are great employees in the BNSF, but we have to take that initiative. I mean, they take my asset, they park it, and I have to find out about it through my own efforts. But then you can contact the operations people, and they will tell you generally what the situation is, whether they're waiting on crews or power, and typically what the plan is. We're going to pick it up tomorrow afternoon, and so you can get the information that you need. As David pointed out, you don't get the forecasting information for down the road of how you can expect those sets to run, because you just kind of have to look back and kind of apply that information to take it forward as to your cycle time going to be 8 days, or if it's going to be 12 days or 5 days, whatever.
So, Mr. Atkins, are you saying since you know who to call at the railroad and you have direct contacts, you don't really need any additional information from the railroad? You know everything you need to know?
No, because sometimes it doesn't work out. Then you go back and say, okay, well, it was supposed to be picked up yesterday. Why isn't it? Where is it? What's the next plan? That one didn't work. So, but it's not a matter of integrity or anything. It's just, it's a very complex operation they run. There's no doubt about it. It's hard. You know, if it was easy, everybody would want to do it, but I certainly don't.
Yeah, I think I agree pretty much with Mark that you can always, once you find out your train stopped, which you can, like he said, if you look on your own, you can call them and you can have a conversation. But again, it's kind of it's not like you pull a car off to the side of the road because you have to put gas in it or something like that. I mean, you have discrete crews, discrete other movements, trains crossing. So sometimes if a train gets set down, it could be 24 hours, 36 hours before they actually have a situation where they can get a crew on it at the right time to move it. So I don't think additional reporting on like an individual train basis would really add anything that we can't already find out.
Well, I'm just in Camp Swampy sometimes and don't have the access, to ship coal since I don't ship any coal. But I think I get a lot of feedback that folks would like to have more information on their cycle time forecast, and maybe that's not possible. We're asking for predictive cycle times, but how can you put in a forecast of the tonnage that you're going to ship next month with the trains that you own or control if you don't know what the cycle time is? And the cycle time that you're using is what is up on the website. So that's a complaint that I have. I don't know how big of a deal that is, and you can work around it, but it makes it hard, or the utilities tell me, for them to plan.
So, Mr. Warner, the kind of last question, you laid out some additional information that you'd like to have in your testimony.
Correct. Right.
I couldn't write fast enough to write it all down, but I figured that we could get it through the testimony. But one of the things I'm wondering is, if you had all of that information, how would you see that helping your members, and what would you see as the benefit?
Well, I think, the benefit would probably be in trying to do some kind of planning, or even if we looked at the information over time, are things moving in the right direction, the wrong direction? And we're focusing a little bit more on coal service. I think some of these numbers that we get in aggregate don't necessarily reflect what's happening or what's going to happen to us. Mm-hmm. When we see the railroad overall is moving more cars, or even overall is moving more coal cars, that doesn't really speak necessarily to the corridors that are affecting my plants.
So in some ways, maybe some of the information that's out there now is the right sort of information, but you need it provided in a more granular way.
I think that'd be a very good way of putting it, yes.
Okay. Thank you.